Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the next in our series of conversations with leaders in artificial intelligence to connect the worlds of AI and public benefits, human services, and access to these critical programs. I'm Trooper Sanders, CEO of Benefits Data Trust, and I'm really happy to have an extraordinary leader with us today, Elizabeth Kelly of the White House National Economic Council. Recently, the president issued a pretty extraordinary and in-depth executive order on artificial intelligence that was followed up by additional guidance from the Office of Management and Budget. Throughout the administration, there have been a number of steps around artificial intelligence and encouraging trustworthy, safe, responsible, and ethical approaches to artificial intelligence as it has dominated the conversations around the water cooler and the public square, that a number of efforts have been underway. So, Elizabeth, welcome. So pleased to have you here.
So pleased to be here.
Wonderful. Well, first, maybe just talk a little bit about your role and how do you define artificial intelligence?
Sure. So I'm Special Assistant to the President at the National Economic Council, responsible for our work around technology, including artificial intelligence. So I've spent a lot of the last year focused on president's agenda on artificial intelligence, including the admittedly lengthy executive order. That EO has its own also lengthy definition of artificial intelligence. But for conversational purposes, I think it's useful to think of AI as computational systems trained to make statistical predictions of many sorts. And that definition reminds us of a couple important points. First, it reminds us what the outputs of AI systems really are. Statistical predictions are probabilistic guesses. Sometimes these predictions can be quite good. For example, when ChatGPT predicts what word will come next in a particular sentence. But they can also be very wrong, and they're only as good as the data that they're trained on. The other phrase is computational systems. And again, this reminds us that AI refers to a system or a tool used by humans to achieve certain ends. We can augment human actions, decision-making with AI, but it's ultimately the human actors who are responsible for how it's used. And the last piece is of the many sorts of predictions. I think in recent months, we've been really focused on sort of this revolution of generative AI, as we've seen a rapid advance in its ability to create all sorts of contents like text, images, audio, and video. But it's only one example of this broader category of AI technologies. And we've been using traditional AI, machine learning, predictive analytics for many years. And there's many more innovations to come on all of those technologies too.
Yeah. So the president, as we said, just issued an executive order, but there have been a number of other things that have happened during the administration. So maybe first take a bit of a wider scope and talk about the administration's overall approach and philosophy around AI and society.
Absolutely. So as you said, the EO was sort of a midpoint in the work, certainly not a start or a culmination. The president has been out there on these issues for quite some time, starting with the AI Bill of Rights, which really outlined what we think are the key principles and priorities to make sure that AI is used in ways that support and advance humans rather than harming them. So principles like anti-discrimination, privacy, rights protecting. It's very much aligned to with things you're seeing coming out of Europe and other countries, and speaks to some of the global alignment we've been able to achieve with like-minded partners on what principles we should prioritize for AI. But we followed that up with a risk management framework that came out of NIST, or the National Institute of Standard Technology, which is focused on sort of what are the guidelines for both developers and deployers of AI, and how can we make industry be responsible partners, even with the breakneck speed of technological development. And then this summer, the president received voluntary commitments from first 7 and then a total of 15 developers of the frontier large language models. Those are the ones producing the most powerful systems that they would make sure in their development of their systems, they were prioritizing cybersecurity, that they were prioritizing content provenance and watermarking, other ways to know is content actually generated by AI or generated by a human, red teaming to identify real vulnerabilities in the system. A lot of the principles you'd later see in the EO. So I think that if you make it through the 111 pages of the EO, you'll see a lot of echoes of the work that came before it, speaking to really the unified approach that we've been taking as a government.
Right. And now turning to the executive order, what are some of the key pillars of it, and what should people expect to see unfolding over the next year?
Sure. So the president directed his team to pull every lever at our disposal to capture both the extraordinary promise of AI as well as protect against its very real risks. And so what you see in the EO is a real whole of government effort, both to make sure that we are protecting our safety and security while thinking about its deployment in the lives of everyday Americans. So it directs the establishment of new standards for AI safety and security, the protection of Americans' privacy, the advancement of equity and civil rights, and the government's own use of AI. It stands up for consumers and workers, promotes innovation and competition, advances American leadership around the world, and so much more. As I said, it's a bit lengthy, so I will not go into all of it, but happy to touch on a couple of things that I think are especially relevant for this group. The safety pieces have certainly gotten a lot of press and attention as we think about making sure that the developers of the most powerful AI systems are sharing their safety test results and other critical information with the US government. But I think there's equally important provisions around privacy, civil rights, workers. So you may have noted that when we announced the executive order, the president reiterated his call for comprehensive privacy legislation because we recognize that artificial intelligence has real harms to privacy. It both enables seemingly disparate pieces of information about an individual to be pulled together in a way that can be damaging to them and enable fraud and other negative effects. And it fuels sort of this global demand for data and in a way that could just increase its collection. So part of what the EO does is says, okay, we need to have Congress create comprehensive privacy legislation. But in the interim, the administration is doing everything it can. So for example, the Federal Trade Commission is taking action under its commercial surveillance authority. We're seeing the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau work to crack down on the harms from data brokers who create giant files of information about individuals. And we're working to sort of advance innovation through supporting privacy techniques and privacy preserving technologies in ways that could sort of help us get ahead of the problem before it continues to grow. On the civil rights side, we've talked about the AI Bill of Rights, and we'd also have previously directed agencies to combat algorithmic discrimination in an earlier executive order. And federal regulators have been very forward-leaning about using their existing authorities to protect people's rights and safety. As Chair Khan of the FTC has said so eloquently, there is no AI exception to the laws in the books. But the EO goes further and requires that clear guidance be provided to landlords, lenders, and federal contractors to keep AI algorithms from being used to exacerbate discrimination, and making sure that there's best practices developed to ensure fairness throughout the criminal justice system with regards to the use of AI. I think this speaks to it. Sorry, go ahead, Trooper.
Oh, I mean, one of the areas that I thought was interesting is talking about the rights impacting AI, and where it's specifically called out federal benefits and public benefits alongside child welfare, health, housing. Talk a bit about that piece around the rights impacting AI and its importance around federal benefits and public benefits.
Absolutely. So I love that you not only called out the executive order, but also our OMB memo, which I think is an equally important but even wonkier document, because part of what we're doing is really outlining sort of how the federal government will be using AI going forward, and how state governments and other public benefits riders may want to think about it too. We know that there's huge potential upside here. We've identified as the federal government over 700 potential use cases for artificial intelligence to better improve public benefits, to enable drug discovery, to improve infrastructure, lots of other things. And where we know that there are relatively low risk to deploying AI, the executive order directs agencies to try and remove the barriers that do exist. So, for example, improving data infrastructure, a whole of government talent surge, speeding up procurement processes, trying to cut the usual red tape. But to your point, I think we have to be incredibly careful on any use of AI that is safety or rights impacting. And that's a key distinction that the OMB MMO makes. Safety impacting, I think of as related to things like the functioning of critical infrastructure, emissions, or hazardous materials. Rights impacting goes very much to the heart of your members' concerns, which is as we think about employment, law enforcement, government benefits. These are decisions that have huge implications for people's lives and well-being, and we need to have greater protections in these higher risk contexts. So part of the things that we have, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, how should the work that you're doing, and how should, if you're a leader of a state public benefits agency and others, and you see, oh, my area is specifically called out, how should they be thinking about AI in their day-to-day work and in their engagement with the federal government?
Sure. So I think part of what we were trying to do is sort of have the federal government lead by example and offer some sort of options about how we're thinking about it, in hopes that could be helpful to our colleagues at state and local level. So, for example, for rights impact uses of AI, we're thinking about AI impact assessments, real-world testing, making sure that there's independent evaluations with ongoing monitoring, public notification and consultation, and that we're trying to advance equity, by assessing and mitigating disparate impacts and using representative data as part of training these systems and training these models. More specifically, the executive order also talks about how health benefits as well as food benefits should be thinking about AI. So one of the things called out is the EO directs the Department of Health and Human Services to publish a plan addressing how state and local governments can use AI to improve the delivery of benefits. And this will talk about things like how can we actually expand benefits accessibility using AI while incorporating the essential safeguards, notifications to benefit recipients about when AI is used, and very importantly, processes for appealing decisions to human reviewers. This is something we've seen previous in the financial services context as well as the labor context, where AI will make a mistake and it means that someone's pay is docked or someone is denied a loan. And if there is not a human in the loop and an adequate review process, that's got life-changing impacts, and we have to get this right.
Yeah. So you've often convened the tables, important conversations around AI, and certainly have a seat at these important tables around AI. The human service and public benefits leaders who are watching this have their own tables, and their agendas are quite full with their day-to-day work. But to the extent that AI is at the table, is on the agenda, what are the one or two smart questions or things that they should bring up every time at these conversations to drive the conversation in their own agencies?
Sure. So I think there's two things that I would add. I think one is AI is a tool, and it can be the right tool or it can be the wrong tool. So sort of taking a critical eye and saying, is AI the right tool to improve our administration of benefits, improve how we're able to serve people, or is it not? We can sometimes get swept up with enthusiasm for the new thing, and being very cognizant of what the upsides and downsides are, I think, is key to this conversation. I think the second piece is, what does this mean for people on the ground? Are we, using this to expand benefits, reach people who we previously couldn't reach? Or are we seeing potential negatives in terms of people who should have received benefits and being denied benefits, automation in a way that takes away the human review process? So being that sort of ethical and moral compass is incredibly important. The vice president said it really eloquently. We so often talk about the existential risks of AI and sort of the what does this mean in terms of cybersecurity and sort of the future of the planet. But when someone is denied benefits, that's existential for them. Existential for who is really the key question that should drive this.
Yeah. So I know when you are not having to review many drafts of executive orders and guidance and other things, there's so much around AI to keep up with. I like to say we are all students of AI because it's just emerging and evolving so fast. What's your one or two favorite resources, books, podcasts, etc., that help you keep up with the world of AI?
I'll throw out a couple, and as you say, there are many excellent resources out there. I really like the Import AI newsletter for updates on the cutting edge research that is happening on AI. And I make sure to read, whatever comes out of the Stanford Center on human-centered artificial intelligence, which does some really thoughtful work. I've recently been reading a paper by Ganesh Sitaraman called The Anti-Monopoly Approach to Governing Artificial Intelligence. One of the things the Biden administration has been very focused on is having a robust and competitive ecosystem and making sure we're not entrenching incumbents. And with AI and the limited access to data, to compute, to semiconductors, we risk having real entrenchment of incumbents in a way that is contrary to that goal. And the paper has some interesting ideas about how the AI value chain is structured. How can we continue our efforts to promote a robust and competitive ecosystem?
Wonderful. Well, Elizabeth, thank you very much, and for taking time out, and thank you to all of our viewers. Thanks so much.